I mean, one, I'll tell you, this isn't something I've shared, at least. Honestly, I've never shared it. I don't think this publicly, in a kind of format, like this. Um, but and it's also something that I've really grown to become more comfortable with talking about. Interestingly enough, like within the past, I would say year. Um, but yeah, no, when I was
Hello, everyone. This is the third episode here of Ordinary Excellence, and I have the pleasure of having Chaz Berry here. He is the current strength and conditioning coach at GW, George Washington, which was my alma mater. So, very excited to have him here. I think he played a big part in my development as a player there. Was always just, putting his best foot forward, which allowed me to, put my best foot forward. And even more than that was just like, the confidence that he instilled in me, I think was really, and also the advice that he would give to me really helped me excel. And I know a lot of other of my fellow teammates kind of say the same exact thing. And I think the biggest thing here is like the way that you went about your work. You were always about your business and you always came in with a positive attitude. And so I thought it would be very fitting to have you on this one. So excited to have you here and kind of just want to start off by asking you to give the audience a little bit about yourself. So like, where you were grown up, where you were raised, where you went to college, and then ultimately like how you ended up at GW and how you got into strength and conditioning.
man, I hope I don't talk too much on that. That's that's a long journey there. But no, I appreciate you having me, Elias. I love being here. But I'm from Long Island, New York, so that's where I grew up. Um, and a few different towns, but mostly in like that Deer Park, Bayshore, Wyandanch area. Um, and so yeah, from Long Island, I got my 4-year degree at North Carolina Central University, that's in Durham, North Carolina. My parents moved up here, while I was in school, to this DMV area. And yeah, I was sleeping on their couch and, at that time I was reading a lot of books, a lot of books, after getting my undergrad, just about, next steps, in my career, like how do I move forward? How do I grow? How do I develop? How do I land a job? And those books kind of, you just talked about confidence. One thing I came away from after having read all those books, about career management and how to find a job was confidence, And I kid you not, I'll tell you the story. What I did was, as a result of that, is I got a long list of contacts right here in the DMV area of any organization that seemed like it had anything to do, with strength and conditioning, right? Which is what I knew I was interested in, right? Sport performance. I made a long list of contacts. I had their emails, phone numbers. I got a little portfolio. I had my resume, cover letter. I got dressed up, and I literally went out knocking on doors. Like I went out knocking on doors, just introducing myself to people in the community. Um, and what became of that, it's funny, I read this one book, called Highly Effective Networking by this guy, Orville Pearson. So I was just learning about the ins and outs of networking, what it is, what it isn't. And one thing I learned from the guy, he's like, listen, like anytime you get the opportunity to talk to another human being about your goals, it's gold. That's a gold opportunity. You should treat it as such, right? It doesn't matter who you're speaking to. It's in your interest to speak to everyone as if they are valuable, right? Because they are. And also that's just that's how you should interact with everyone, right? If you're just trying to be a good person, decent person. But anyway, so I knocked on this one door over there on Thomas Jefferson Street, off of K Street, over there underneath the Metro Rail. And
Yeah.
I kid you not, listen, man, like again, fortunately the book kind of, broke me out of some instincts, I think that I would have had, prior to reading that book, which is judging a book by its cover, maybe, right? Or, having that kind of oh yeah, I only want the big time, right? Kind of mentality. Because I looked at the facility and it didn't look like a place that I'm like, oh yeah, I want to work there, right? It didn't have that energy, didn't have that vibe. But again, I remembered what the guy was talking about in the book. He's like, listen, he's like, that mentality will set you back, more than you know. He's like, so any opportunity you have again to talk to another human being about your goals, right, is a good opportunity because you may also help them. So anyway, so I knock on the door and long story short, that ended up leading me to an internship opportunity, at GW. I hadn't even heard of the school, at the time, which ended up, turning into, me getting my graduate assistant excuse me, my master's degree paid for right by the school because I got brought on as a graduate assistant. And then from being a graduate assistant, then I came on, full time, as a strength and conditioning coach back in 2017. And I'm gonna tell you, man, listen, like truly though, like my journey here at GW, starting from the very beginning, has been nothing short of, life changing. Like I've grown and evolved in more ways than I think we have time to speak about on this podcast. But so again, but again, had it not been for me reading that book, and I think again, being educated out of some of my uh, uh instincts that I think hold people back right in their career development, I don't think I'd be here. So that's a little bit about my journey of where I'm from and how I ended up at GW.
Thanks for sharing that. You actually were able to already get to my next question, so I'm glad that we knocked that out about how you landed at GW. And you also talked about like the growth that you got. I'm actually going to touch on that later, but I wanted to take a step back and dive into a little bit because I think it would be interesting for the GW audience to hear of like where was there like a defining moment or like where was it that you decided like strength and conditioning was going to be your passion in your career? A little bit like touching on that, just kind of like hearing about like where that kind of came about.
Yeah, so really, I had an interest in fitness, I would say, that came from my experience being a registered amateur boxer, as an adolescent. So I was a USA amateur boxer, or registered with USA Amateur Boxing 2013, pretty much all throughout my adolescence. So, I would compete and things like that. And, in no in no arena is it more clear to you that fitness matters, right, than when you're in a ring and someone's trying to throw punches at your head.
Yeah.
It's like it's pretty obvious that if you're out of shape, that things aren't going to go well. So, yeah, that's kind of where fitness kind of became, important to me. I just loved the, the challenge, of trying to improve your body, maximize your fitness. Like I've been there before where I felt the limitations of my physicality, right, and how those limitations were limiting my potential, in the ring. And so therefore being curious, like, how do I get past these physical limitations, right? Like what's the best training interventions for that? And developing a hunger for that information. And then, with that, that kind of and stumbling on being on the internet and things like that, just kind of stumbling across this field, exercise science. And I was like, oh, like I didn't know that was a thing. I was like, I think I might want to study that in college. So that's kind of where that came from. And the health side of, or at least, well, I'm not gonna get into that just yet, but that's where my interest in fitness and performance, started.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. And I actually kind of along those lines, I wanted to actually dive a bit deeper, like a bit earlier than maybe I did on my past two podcasts, but I
Mhm.
had a curiosity question for you.
Yep.
So thinking of like strength and conditioning and I guess like, right, the value add, for example, when a student athlete's in their 4 years, it's clear, right? You're helping them be the best version of themselves on the field, wherever, whatever their sport is. That's what you're doing. Um, and then taking it like if you look at like a big school, I'm thinking like right, strength and conditioning coach at Alabama, right? A lot of those kids want to go professionally. So that's helping them achieve their professional goals. But I'm curious because the reality at GW is a lot of student athletes either know right away or find out really early that they're not going to play professionally. They're not going to pursue that sport after their 4 years. I'm wondering if you ever account for this and if you think how you can impact students beyond their 4 years. So like things that you try to instill into like your student athletes that you're working with that's going to take them beyond just like their 4 years that they're playing their sport.
Love that question, man. Love that question. 'Cause listen, I'm gonna just tell you right now, if if the job of sport performance, okay, is being done properly, okay, because it's that's a holistic effort, right? It's not just about physicality, right? It's not, right? Like, yes, that's what we do. I think when people think of sport performance and they think of our jobs, they think, of course, they think the weight room. And honestly, I think that's about as far as their minds go. They think weights, they think weight room, they think exercises. But true sport performance is looking at the whole human, right? It's looking at the whole human and considering all of it. Um, and what that means is, you all need to be, educated, right, about the role that sleep has in your performance. You need to be educated about the role that good nutritional lifestyle behaviors, right, have in your performance. And then on top of that, you said that, and I appreciate you, sharing that with me. But you said it impacted your confidence, right? Your mindset, right? Your and then potentially affecting things like your self-efficacy, right? You're feeling like you can do things, right? When you put in the time and you put in the effort, right? And you make the proper investment. Those are things that, yo, that just serves you for the rest of your life. So what I'm saying is this, sport performance done properly, right? Improves performance on the field, yes, but it improves performance in your life. And that's not an overstatement. Like it does. Okay. So like when you take care of those foundational elements, of eating properly, right? Hydrating properly, sleeping properly, again, being mindful of your stress, your raw stress levels, maybe being introduced, right, to ways of reducing stress. Also, on top of the fact that you guys are introduced to how to use the weight room properly, right? Those are things that most people have no idea. They're afraid of using the weight room because they're afraid of getting hurt. But here it is, you all, right, are acquainted with the weight room. It's not scary to you. And again, hopefully, as a result of being educated about lifestyle and exercise, you guys continue those behaviors well after your careers. That again now support your performance in the workplace. You know.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'll also say another thing that you didn't mention that I always thought about is like something that I guess, that almost like you taught me, or maybe I already possessed it, but something that you would remind me is like putting 100% effort into everything that you do and always coming in with a positive attitude. I think you always like had those two character traits every time you came in, every single day. I don't think I ever like didn't see those two character traits being shown. And kind of on those lines, I'm wondering where, because I think everyone, that works with you could say this, that you always came in with a positive attitude every day. Where do you get that motivation every single day? Despite it's a 6 a.m. lift and you're still bringing that, 100% energy and you're getting guys motivated and then the players sometimes aren't reciprocating that same energy. Where do you get it from in terms of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy when you feel like what you do matters and you feel like what you do, makes a difference. I mean, I don't see who wouldn't feel positive about that. You
Yeah.
know, I think it would be pretty hard to feel positive about something that you don't think matters. So I really think that's just what it comes down to. And just my experience also that sometimes things that matter, you don't always see the immediate you don't always see the truth of that right immediately, right? So even if I don't necessarily see something, like for example, let's say I'm investing in something or investing in somebody, and I'm not necessarily seeing the return on that investment just yet, it doesn't discourage me because I'm like, look, sometimes you just gotta wait. Sometimes like you might not see that today, you see it tomorrow. So anyway, but just to answer your question, like I really think it comes down to feeling like what you're doing is making a difference, feeling like what you do matters. Um, and yeah, I don't see this seems to be hard. It seems hard to not be positive about that.
No, I totally agree. And I kind of wanted to drift the conversation a little bit differently to a couple of points that I know you wanted to discuss. Going to read out like one of the quotes, but
Hmm.
it's essentially the concept that growth isn't linear.
Hmm.
As a topic, I wanted you to just maybe give a little bit of information on like what you exactly meant by that, and then how that's kind of impacted your day to day and how you go about both your personal life and then also your work.
Yeah, that's a big conversation there, but it's just amazing how that is true in your life. That is true even just with you know the way that this human body grows and responds to physical challenge and physical demands, the growth that it experiences in response to that isn't linear. Sometimes it is, right, but sometimes it also it's sometimes it's exponential. you know Sometimes it's linear, sometimes it's a bit slower. But something that I ultimately believe in this life is that persistence beats resistance every time. Persistence beats resistance every time. So sometimes when you are hammering the rock, let's say we're going to use that analogy, right, of the hammering of the rock, right? Sometimes that's what your performance goals can feel like, right? Your performance goals can feel like, or your life goals, like you're hammering a rock, right? But you don't see any change, right? You don't see any changes yet. But, that story goes on to say, you know, the stone cutter continues to hammer the rock perhaps 100 times without seeing so much as a crack in it. But on that 101st blow, the rock cracks in two, right? But it wasn't that blow that did it. It was all the blows that came before, right? Like sometimes you just need to soften things up, but you got to keep on striking it. Um, and I think again, that's just that's a metaphor for your life, in many ways. I know that's the case for mine, but I'll finish there.
Yeah, and first, just commenting on that, I think that's something that's definitely resonated for me. I always used to hear a quote somewhere along the lines. It's like, it may not happen the first year, second year, third year. You might see no change, but it's the fourth where you make a massive jump. I think that was like the case with me in my soccer career, obviously.
Mm,
So I definitely resonate with that. But
mm,
something that just came to my mind was like, and sticking back to like GW athletic programs, right? And I can
mm,
speak to just GW soccer, but I can also speak to some of the other programs I know pretty well. How do you how do you respond when programs, because you're obviously very involved in them, some of them do see that not as much growth over periods of time, because you've been at GW for a while. If you like, maybe a team misses out on playoffs, A10, 1, 2, 3, 4 years in a row, how do you like come how does that change the way you approach, if anything? Do you ever see changes in programs when that happens? Like what is I just maybe your thoughts around like programs and the concept of like growth isn't linear.
mm. Yeah, I think it depends. Everything just needs to be reevaluated, of course. Um, I don't think, I think some people, one of the things that they do that they shouldn't do is they fix what doesn't need to be fixed, right? Like that's like I think, and they mistake the busyness and the movement and the change of things with progress, right? They mistake change with progress. Like if I change, oh, that means I've moved forward. It's like no, you need to change should happen, okay, after a sincere consideration of what the problems are, okay, and then now offering solutions, right, that are tailored to handle those specific problems, right? And okay, now there's change, right? But it shouldn't just, but again, you should be applying those solutions in a very um tailored way, in a very specific way, right? Very targeted way. But again, that can only come after, really honest consideration of what the problem is. And sometimes, because people don't think carefully enough about what the problems are, they're just throwing solutions at something, that don't really matter, right? Like again, really, and they feel comfortable with that because again, sometimes people mistake the same way people mistake busyness with productivity or busyness with hard work or whatever. They mistake, just a change with progress, with forward progress. Like, no,
Yeah.
so again, it just really comes down to having the humility also, having the humility, the honesty, um, the desire to do the hard work of sitting down with the context, and the willingness and I would say courage sometimes, courage to identify, what the problem is, and therefore now then you're more clear as to what the solution might need to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was actually reverting back to something that you just talked about a little bit, but we're talking about it before. You were
Mhm.
kind of having a little bit. You were talking about along the lines of like the output that you're giving, and then sometimes it's not being reciprocated in that sense. Was wondering, because you kind of ultimately were saying how you keep a positive attitude with that and stuff. Was wondering if there was any situations ever, you don't have to give necessarily the specifics, but like any situations ever where you really felt like for a sustained period of time that the effort you were giving was not reciprocated with a program or a specific team, and ultimately like if that ever caused conflict, like if that ever changed the way you approached with that team or your day to day in terms of like GW and like the strength and conditioning that you were doing with them.
Yeah, I think listen, this is what that comes down to is we all want the same things. And it's understanding that sometimes first off, in my job, in my position is about meeting people, where they are, meeting programs where they are, meeting athletes where they are. Context driven programming. Because, programming should be context driven, right? And tailored to the person, what that means is that that's why sometimes you could have two strength coaches, two sport performance coaches, with equal credentials, equal ability, approach, two teams that are technically, maybe the same sport, right? And yet their programs look different. Now, why is that? Well, because there's another truth that all roads lead to Rome, right? All roads lead to Rome, meaning there's different paths to get ultimately to the same goal. And so sometimes, yes, as a result of, working with a certain program, maybe they they saw the path that I was going, and they were like, you know what? I'm not sure of that path. I'm suspicious of that path, right? Like, so I would prefer this one. And fortunately, again, and this is something that comes with experience too, but the more experienced you are, the more tools in the toolbox you have. So the more experienced you are, the more tools in the toolbox you have, and therefore you can say, okay, so you're suspicious of that tool, or you're suspicious of doing it that way. That's okay, because guess what? The way that you just said, perfectly valid as well. So you know what? We're gonna do it that way. You understand what I'm saying? And also, I think that's something that's not appreciated enough either, is that there is more than one way to do things. I think there's too many egos out here, man. And I think part of it is lack of education. I do think that the less educated and informed you are, the less you're able to see that yes, there are more than one ways of doing things. Listen, let's just say this. Let's talk about coaching, right? The way that coaching should be done. Listen, man, there's all kind of philosophies out there when it comes to coaching. Like, not all coaches coach the same. There's coaches out there who've won championships who coach like this, and there's other coaches who won championships who coach like this. And yet sometimes those coaches insist that no, 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 this way is the way. It's like, how? Like, that guy's winning championships, this guy's winning championships. So clearly what it means is there must be more than one way, right, to go about this thing. So I think it's just a matter of, even when you do, come up, honestly, and again, even with those coaches, like sometimes, I think they need to tailor their approach depending on who their audience is, in order to be effective, right, for that audience. So that's what I'll say really what it comes down to, in our position as sport performance, coaches is, having a lot of tools in the toolbox, being able to understand what matters, right? Keeping the main thing, understanding that there's many, many different ways that you can go about ensuring that that main thing is happening, um, and just get the job done. Like, because listen, I'll give you another example. Like, okay, COVID, okay, that wasn't ideal, right? But something I know I've told you all before is like, I gave you all examples of like, look, bro, it's like, listen, there's people all around the world, okay, who do not have Division 1 facilities, all right, that have, or if you want to go back in time, right, haven't had fraction of the opportunities and the resources that you all have, right, and yet have done some pretty extraordinary things, right? So like, I think too much is being made of, you know, um, too much is being made of methods and approaches, and people aren't seeing what the main thing is, that ultimately lead to, a successful outcome, and then I think if they do, then they would, maybe be less hung up about the way things are doing or the way things are being done, and just, again, stay focused on what those main things are.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I think it really shows one of the major reasons why I wanted to have you on here is the fact that you can keep a positive attitude and a focus regardless of like what's thrown out. And then you were even talking about COVID, right? A lot of people had a negative mindset towards that, but keeping a positive and seeing that situations are just a lot worse for other people. And you should be fortunate with what you have and work with what you have to achieving your ultimate goal, I think makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah. And then in terms of just very broad kind of question here, but was curious on like what you would say, or like one or maybe a couple of like the major challenges you've faced as a strength and conditioning coach at GW, and then maybe some of like the best things that you think has happened for you in that role.
Yeah, let's see. I'm just tell you that one might be tough, only because again, I cannot begin to tell you, what this place has meant to me in my life. You know, I've I'm telling you, man, mostly, and people ask me like why, and I'm just telling you, it's the people, it's the people, and that's all even goes down to the student athletes. But I think I was definitely fortunate to land on some really great leadership, here at GW, people who've poured into me. Like I was I'm so much more of a confident person, and listen, this is gone not even as a coach, just in my life, as a consequence of my experiences and the way that, my experiences in this department have shaped me. But, you know, those experiences shaped me in that way. Again, I think because I was met with challenges, opportunities, while also being guided and mentored, with positive leadership. Leadership like Matt Johnson. He's actually the head strength coach for the Washington Wizards right now. Um, even going back, before that, being brought on by Ben Kenyon, who is a veteran NBA, strength coach as well. Brandy Walker, Paul Berry, Matt Johnson again, who's, my mentor. Um, then again, on and on, just and even Tanya, even now down to my, director that I have right now, Eric Guthrie, awesome. I mean, listen, I'm just telling you, man, like I just feel like I'm like, how did I get so lucky to be around like such awesome people, administration after administration, the head direct supervisor after direct supervisor. It's just been amazing. And then as far as I mean, I could say more about that, but well, actually, no, I'll say this too. Positive things also, man. What's amazing, what's beautiful is what I love is the times when I didn't do it for this, right? And I didn't even realize how much it would mean to me until after it happened. But like investing in, you guys, investing in my people, and having these conversations with you, right? That, are a mix of a lot of things, right? They're a mix of things that are related to things on the field. They're a mix of things related to just life, and then people to send me an email maybe after they graduate, just thanking me and telling me specifically, right, like how I impacted them and how I made a difference, in their life and their development. Like that's been some pretty awesome, experiences. And honestly, who wouldn't be, I don't know what the word is, but feel great, feel happy, feel appreciative of having had the opportunity, right, to make a difference in somebody's life like that. Like that's something, man. Listen, that's like unless you're a psychopath, I don't see how that could ever be boring. You know what I'm saying? I don't see how that could ever be not fun. Um, but then, as far as challenges, I mean, yeah, we've let's see, we've definitely had, quite a bit of turnover. So I think what being at GW has challenged me with is being adaptable, and being flexible. I don't think that I'm just going to say this. I don't think anybody can come at me for not being adaptable, not being a
Yeah,
flexible
I
person.
agree.
I think I've had to exercise a lot of that, over the past 7, 8 years. Um, and not saying I'm perfect at it for sure. I think I could still, grow, what have you. But I definitely know that those are traits that I've had to exercise quite a bit. Just being adaptable when it comes to, being under new leadership, being with new teams, being in new circumstances, Um, but yeah, no, but it's just all of it. I'll tell you right now, all of it's been for my good, yeah, all of it's been for my good for sure.
Yeah, thanks for sharing both sides of the story. When you were talking about turnover, were you talking about faculty wise?
We're talking about like our sport performance staff, so
Okay.
like I think,
Okay.
yeah, so I think Eric, Guthrie, who's our director right now, doing an incredible job, like just really taking us to the next level. But he's my fourth director, you should say in fourth director in, yeah, 7, 8 years. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And also thanks for sharing the positives and the best parts you've gotten out of it. I think that definitely resonates with a lot of people. Feeling like you're giving back, feeling like you're making an impact for someone or a group of people is always something that you can appreciate. I think people can go their entire lives really not feeling like that. So
Hmm.
not feeling like their career or the value add that they're providing, which is typically tied to their career, is actually providing a value to a lot of people. So it's definitely good to hear, and pretty
Yeah.
obvious that your career choice and the way you've gone about that career choice has definitely been displayed in that way. I think it's clear by the fact that I have you on a podcast here, right? Like that in itself just speaks for it. But wanted to get you a chance to talk about another one of the principles that you wanted to speak on. The
Hmm.
fact that I have it written down here that detours become people's paths. The way that
Hmm.
I interpreted it, and maybe completely wrong, but it's like I saw it as like bad habits that you kind of have. Like if you have like a goal and you start detouring from that, that's gonna be the route you take. I'm not sure if that. Tell me if that was completely wrong, but I wanted to hear what your like sense of was that.
Yeah, no, I'll build on that. Really, man, I tell you, that just, I mean, I hope, it's evident, Jen, how much, I've loved my experience, as a sport performance coach, specifically at GW, and how much it's impacted my life and how much I do enjoy my job. Um, and really just feel like, man, like I've found my thing. I cannot see myself doing anything else. Like I love this here. And again, just even what you just said, like being able to do a job where I can actually, realize the impact, right? See the impact. Sometimes people do jobs they don't necessarily see it, or they don't necessarily have as much intimate connection with that impact, but I do. That's another thing I think special about, this job, and really honestly, I would say, GW as well. But no, what I was saying is, the detour becomes the path. Sometimes, listen, you thought that you were going one way, right? And you had everything laid out ahead of you, right? You said, I'm going to do this. And then at mile marker one, I'm going to do that. And at mile marker two, I'm going to do this and such, right? You had your little roadmap. And then, hey, there's a log in the road or whatever, right? Something in the road. The road is down. You got to take a detour, you know. Um, but that detour, uh, while it seemed like it was taking you away from your destination, it was actually the way that you should have gone. And had you gone the original way, right, that you thought you were supposed to go, there might have been danger actually on that path, right? So it's like you thought you were gonna go this way and you thought it was the best way, but here you took a detour and maybe you were complaining like, oh man, but that's gonna take longer, this and that, such and such. But you actually find out hindsight is 2020. You're like, oh snap, no, actually that detour saved my life, right? That
And is
detour
that,
actually
sorry to
good.
interrupt you. I want to hear a little bit more. Is that a principle that you've gained from like personal experience? Is this like, stuff that
Oh,
you've learned
absolutely.
about? Okay. Maybe you
Absolutely.
could, like, speak on maybe some experiences that kind of made this, a core principle that you kind of understand and live by.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Detour becomes the path. That really connects, everything, man. I tell you. I mean, one, I'll tell you, this isn't something I've shared, at least I say I've never shared it. I don't think this publicly, in a kind of format, like this. Um, but and it's also something that I've really grown to become more comfortable with talking about. Interestingly enough, like within the past, I would say year. Um, but yeah, no, when I was fourth year, I'll tell you something, man. I was in my fourth year of undergrad, at another school. And actually I transferred from that school, but I was in my, fourth year last year, right? Fall, it was fall semester. And I would leave on a medical withdrawal, you know. Um, and as you might imagine, right? Like, it's like, hey, you're about to finish, right? And now here you're leaving on a medical withdrawal, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't graduate for another 3 years after that. So you talk about delay, you talk about detour. Like, yep, listen, I was at that school, and then I didn't even finish at that school. I ended up going to another school, right? Finishing my 4 year degree at another school. So you talk about detour, yeah, huge detour. But again, what I'll tell you is, listen, when I look at that detour and every step of it, I'm telling you, had it not been for that detour, I would not have landed at GW. Um, and I'm just telling you, with the way things have aligned, in my life, being at GW, the emotional, mental support, that I found at GW, the experiences, the challenges, the opportunities, but specifically within a department that I would say it was healthy from the top down, in its leadership structure. I know you had Tanya on, earlier, like, hey man, that's what I'm talking about, right? Like people, individuals like that, in that space. But but yeah, if it had not been for that experience, I wouldn't have ended up going to finding myself at the other 4 year university that I went to, that then actually kind of led me into why I ended up having the internship at GW, and so on and so forth. So that's what I mean by, the detour becomes the path. So when I look back on it, yeah, I felt initially, I remember after that, yeah, I felt frantic, right? As I think a lot of people might, because like, oh, I'm not graduating on time, this and that, da da da, such and such. Um, because in life you're supposed to get your 4 year degree when you're 22, right? That's
Yeah.
what somebody told you, and feeling like I was, being left behind. And yeah, I worked frantically, after that, like trying to catch up and all that, really at the expense of my health. Um, but I'm gonna tell you something else though. What's funny is this is what I mean when I say the detour becomes the path, because I was very much so interested in fitness before that. Okay, before that incident, not so much in health. Okay, as because I equated being fit with being healthy. But I'm gonna tell you right now, I would listen. Yeah, I was fit. My cardiovascularly, I was fit. I was, hitting the weight room, somewhat. I was running like a 5:30 mile, like so I was fit. But sleep was terrible. Drinking energy drinks. Uh, you know, not eating any fiber, not eating any fruits and vegetables. You know what I'm saying? So like the health side of the health and fitness was not there. But with that incident, that gave me a very deep concern and curiosity about my health, that then later on, when I got introduced and exposed to really like the right, I guess you could say, the right resources, I kind of latched on. So like things like, for example, lifestyle medicine, and just really the impact that taking care of your sleep, right, can have on your health, really a healing effect, right, and just really, really again, how when done properly and done right, and you approach nutrition and exercise and you know, um, stress management and all these things, you approach it holistically, how really it can heal your body. Right. But again, I had an interest in that because my body had already gone through something that I was now caused me to have concern about the future of my health. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think, had it not been for that experience, I don't think not even think it wouldn't have, I wouldn't have had as much of a passion and a curiosity and an interest in maximizing, my own health. Um, and investing in it properly, and really having the same standards for my health that I had for my job, right? And other things that I'm doing, because I think we're so backwards like that, and it's amazing. We're so backwards like that. We have all these high standards for all these other things, and we say, oh, don't ever settle, don't ever be complacent. But then when it comes to our health, yeah, we're complacent and we kind of settle. Like, oh, I'm doing good enough. My sleep is good enough. My nutrition is good enough. Like, how, how so? you know?
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think first, to kind of stop you there, thanks for sharing a story that you said you hadn't really told publicly in this format. I appreciate that. It takes a lot to share those types of things. Secondly, you already kind of started talking about it at the end, which was like the next place I was going to go. But you
Mm,
were talking about, and I think it was a big thing that I noticed when we were talking before this was just about that, because you were talking about like how people prioritize, right, their work or their career or other things that ultimately they're replaceable. But on the flip side, they don't prioritize their health. That's not replaceable. And I think for me, um, obviously, I still am in a stage where I obviously care about my career, etc. But I think it needs to be a balance. I think I've like not prioritized my health as much recently, in the sense that, like, talking about sleep, I'm very fit, as you know. I was pretty fit, but like my sleep has been a problem for like 4 or 5 years now.
mm,
Like, not getting. I don't think I've gotten like 8 hours of sleep that many times.
mm.
What's your like a like your take on like that concept, and you started talking about it a little bit, but B, like kind of the advice that you have, because as a young person, you do have to focus on your career and stuff, but you also don't want to neglect your health, right? You need to be able
Mm.
to balance the two. So what's your advice for that?
Yeah, I think, listen, nothing in this life is going to be perfect. Nothing is going to be perfect. Okay. I'll just roll this out here a little bit. Sometimes, things that are really important, yeah, it might cost, something from you, right? But it cannot be made into a lifestyle. That's the thing. It can't be your lifestyle. And it also shouldn't be glorified either. Shouldn't be glorified, it shouldn't be become your lifestyle, shouldn't be normalized, right? I mean, yeah, we're gonna have these one-offs, where we have to do these things. And I'll give an example how I know it is ultimately unavoidable. Um, but fortunately for us, this human body is not, so fragile, right? Like this body's pretty resilient. I mean, when I consider the kind of listen, when I know what I know now, when I look at, what this body needs, for optimal health, and then when I consider what I know to be the average, right? The average performance, of people, or the average performance of how a person performs in their health, if we were to get a letter grade for that, we'd all be getting an F or maybe D for dead. Okay. And so the fact that we're not, it just kind of speaks to the resiliency of the human body. It's like, wow, like you can do that. Like when you look at the American standard diet, like I would, I would imagine that there'd be more people sick than there are, but fortunately, again, this body's pretty resilient. And so there aren't. So anyway, but back to what you were saying though. You know, let's say someone is a parent, right? Hey, they might have to miss sleep, right, as a result of staying up for the newborn, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but guess what? That's a very important job. That's a very important task that just needs to be done. And sometimes, yes, there are things that are that important, that don't really align with your other interests. But again, what? But even with that example that I'm going to go with a little bit, some parents, that's the way they live their parenting life, and they kind of just accept it as the norm, which is putting their health last, right, so that they can put their kids first. But truly, I think what many of them find is that that kind of ends up, ensuring that they don't show up as their best selves, right? As parents. But anyway, so I'm not a parent, so I don't want to talk too heavily on that. But I think many people can appreciate, the truth behind what I just said. So you can't keep putting yourself last, as a way of life. Yeah, maybe sometimes, right, you have to take some hits, but it can't be a lifestyle. So even when it comes to our career, like, yeah, I mean, I think we need to do what we can. We need to keep in mind, right, what the goal is, how we should be living, how we want to live, and always be looking for a way to to change the circumstances, right, so that they're more compatible, right, with what it means to be, a healthy human, right, what it means to live a healthy life. Sometimes it may mean challenging the system itself, the system that you're in, and speaking up and having the courage to do so, or the courage to move on. If the system just seems like, yeah, no, this system doesn't even allow, right, for anything that resembles, reasonable, health and wellness, or for living a lifestyle that's compatible with health and wellness, right? It doesn't even allow for that. So, might mean I need to move on to something else. And people do, people do that, but people need to be honest with themselves, but I definitely, I don't care who you are or what you're doing. If it looks like, your health is the price tag, for socioeconomic mobility, or, your movement, through the ranks, and that's what the cost is perpetually, then you is the problem.
Yeah. And this is leading me to have you talk a little bit about the startup that we were talking about, as well
Mm,
as your book. I'm sure I don't know if you've told people like at GW, so like student athletes. I'm sure
mm,
some of the faculty probably know, but like
mm.
I'm sure at least I didn't know that. So I'm sure alumni don't really know. But if you could talk a little bit about that and how it revolves around health and fitness, and ultimately the goal with it, with both the startup and then how the book came about.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny that the startup and the book, it's all kind of connected, really back to that. Had it not been for that detour, that I had, I would have started this company, and I also wouldn't have written that book and focused on the specific topic that I did focus on. Um, but yeah, so my company is Train with Chaz, so that's what I'm doing on the side, when I'm not working at GW. And what I do is, I help design health and fitness plans for real people with real responsibilities, you know and that is what it sounds like. People often, they know they want to do better for their health, right? They know they want to, whatever the goal is, they want to lose weight. Usually what that simply means is that they want to lose weight as a stepping stone to, transforming to a total health transformation, right? Not just numbers on a scale, right? They're looking for, they want to move better, they want to live better, they want to feel better, and they want to add years to their life and life to their years. um but they often feel like, a lot of fitness approaches out there are too narrow, right? They're too complex, and that they're inflexible, they're rigid, right? And they just don't fit with real life, the real lived lives of real busy people. So what I'm trying to do is, be in their lives, right, at their as their everyday problem solver at their fingertips, helping them get creative, right, find creative ways to, um, live in accordance with health and fitness principles, so that they can get the results that they want, hopefully through an experience that they enjoy. um, but again, but a tailored, right? A tailored experience, a personalized experience. Because I'm telling you, like, yeah, really, oftentimes was getting in the way, and this is something I need. Like the stuff I'm talking about right now, that's really what I needed, at one point, especially after that event that happened to me. Because again, I just went into, this aggressive, tunnel-minded career mode, neglecting my health, right? Because again, I'm so busy trying to catch up, and I needed somebody to tell me about these things, about, how what's actually standing in the way between me and my goals is really my own ideas about what it means to do fitness and what it means to do health. Like I thought it looks one way, right? But really it can be you can be done many ways, and so that's again that's how what I'm trying to offer people. And then with the book, yeah, the book is called Fitness on Your Terms, fitness on your terms, short workouts and simple nutrition for busy lives, you know. And mostly again, what I'm trying to help people walk people through is a mindset shift, first, so getting rid of things like, the all. I'll give you an example of how sometimes seemingly well-meaning advice, right, can actually do you more harm in the long run. So I'll say it right now. And maybe you've heard this before. Someone says, if you're not going to do it right, don't do it at all. Have you heard somebody say that?
Yeah.
Okay. So listen, that is the worst advice you can give to a busy person and their health, because if their idea of doing health and fitness right, does not fit with their life, and then now their response is, well, I'm just going to not do it at all then. Like if I'm not going to do a real workout, right, then I'm just going to do nothing. But really, in that context, some is better than none. Some is better than none, right? So that's just kind of like some of the mindset things that, or mindset shifts that I work people towards, in the beginning of the book. And then just again challenging the perfectionistic mindset that comes with that, the all or none thinking. Either I'm going to do all of what I said I'm going to do, or I'm going to do none of it at all. And I challenge that in the book, in this way. We don't even approach brushing our teeth that way. If we're rushed in the morning, right, and we know we gotta, we gotta get quick out the door, right? Let's say we need to take a shower or whatever. We're gonna do what we can, right? We might normally take a 10-minute shower, but if we're gonna need to, wash off, get our rag or whatever, and do it for like 3 minutes, you're gonna do it, right? Or if you can't brush your teeth and floss your teeth, but as long as you normally do, you're still gonna do something, right? You're not gonna say, well, listen, I can't brush my teeth right, so I'm just gonna go out here with morning breath and walk all day. Like you're not gonna do that. But that's exactly what we do with our health and fitness. We're like, oh, well, I'm not gonna do the full, 45-minute apocalypse workout that I had on schedule. So, I'm not gonna do a 10-minute workout because that's not a real workout. It's like, so anyway, so just trying to help people get past those mental traps, because I've been in those myself for sure. I know those mental traps, they're doing you more harm than you think. So but anyways, that's where what the book is kind of targeted and focused at. And then of course with that mindset shift, what I offer people are some tools, right? Some tools for them to lean on to go with that mindset shift, right? So some simple workouts just to get people moving in the right direction, just to get them going, right? And then I have 20 simple nutrition 20 simple meals, put together there, covering breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And again, they're intended to be simple, just to show people how, simple, healthy eating can be, right? Like it doesn't need to be, your plate doesn't need to look like it belongs in an art museum because it's it's so colorful and so like, well designed, like how sometimes they look on these Instagram posts. It could be more simpler than you think.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think I'll definitely be shouting out your book on LinkedIn, like when I'm doing like the small clips and such. Cause I think even honestly, I could use it. I've always had that mindset where I'm like, I do tend to always find the time to back myself to get that big workout in. But I've always been like, if I can't do like my full workout, I'll just like skip it for the next day. So I think like I've always been in that mindset where it's like a 10-minute workout, especially in that soccer mindset that I've always had. It's like, that 10-minute workout, right? Like maybe
Yeah,
not be the point. So I think I think a lot of people can benefit from that, especially when you lose that structure as a student athlete.
yeah,
Right.
I'm
You lose,
telling you that's a big one. That's a big one. It's amazing how common that is. Like, oh, can't do the whole hour. Cool, that's it. Nothing.
yeah.
You know?
Which is definitely not true. But I wanted to ask maybe one last question about GW and then just talk some like very broad kind of looking in the future stuff as we wrap up.
Yeah.
But just I asked Tanya the same question, and
Mhm.
what would you say is like how you want to be remembered by like GW student athletes, fellow staff members, alumni, etc. Like, how would you say you want to be remembered? Obviously,
I
you're
def
still there, but like when you leave, like because eventually you're not gonna be 90 working there. So like
Yeah, I
eventually,
know, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, well, listen, I mean, truly, man, like what I in my life, I hope people know that I was rooting for them, you know, that I cared, you know, um, because truly I am, like even if I'm dealing with difficult people like this. I don't know. I've seen difficult people change. I have. Really difficult people. Not just at GW, but just in my life. So I love seeing growth. I just love it. Again, I don't know. I'm not sure that anybody really needs to be taught to love growth, but I love seeing people win. I love seeing people grow. I do care about, the growth of other people, and watching them become better versions of themselves mentally, physically. I mean, in athletics, I'm fortunate enough to be able to see both of those growths, right? Physical and mental growth. Um, but yeah, no, I care. I care about you as a person, even beyond, athletics, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Similar notion that like Tanya was saying, but I think you guys both kind of resembled the same character traits in that mindset. So, and I think it's kind of a good wrap up before I ask like the last fun question. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, no, that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on here. I actually think you opened up my eyes to another reason, which is even better, that I didn't even really think about. But yeah, it was overall like, you know, everyone should have the same approach that you did in terms of like coming in every single day, regardless if it's a 6 a.m. lift or a midday session, with the same energy, regardless of like how other people are. Because the reality is, if it was a 6 a.m. lift, some people on our team, and I'm sure it was some similar of other teams, just did not have that same energy that you did. But you still came in the same way. And then on the similar notions that you definitely cared, right? Like if when I was doing my cramping, I'm sure it was similar with other athletes. I'll get 6, 7 text replies from you when I'm asking you a question, right? It's
Hmm.
just, you can see it. You can see it in
Hmm.
your energy. You can see it in the way that you help others and you don't expect anything in return. I think that's the way that everyone should operate. But another thing that I hope people see is like a lot of my audience is like working now and working tough jobs. And you're trying to build your future, build your career, build up your wealth, but not to like neglect your health at the same time. You have to be able
Hmm.
to balance them both. And as your book will be able to help, just finding even 10 minutes for a quick workout, right? Like getting the proper sleep, which is, I'm a victim of that. I haven't done that, but I hope, my audience can see a little bit of that as like the importance of health. I think it just goes under the rug because it's a lot easier than putting off goals in your career, but it's going to catch up to you. Um,
Yeah.
so that was kind of the wrap up there. But my last thing was, what do you see for yourself, career wise? Is still at GW, right? The next 5 to 10 years. Personally, do you have any goals that you're looking to achieve? I know you just put out a book. Is there anything else that you're looking to, maybe some other things that you have on your checklist for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, really, my checklist is just continue to pour into the buckets that I have open right now, you know, um, and continuing to, just maximize my potential and be as effective as I can, in those spaces, because it's funny, something that, Ben Kenyon, who was the first director that I was under, something that, he used to say is dominate your lane, then expand your lane. So some people they want to expand and do too much, at one time, but I know that I have the lanes that I need to have open right now. Working at George Washington University as a strength and conditioning coach, I've been doing that for a while. Definitely a lot more, that I want to do there in terms of helping, my director Eric Guthrie continue to build that department because I love his vision. I also know that, that this venture I have on the side, my startup, is also something that, needs to be part of my overall, life mission as well. No doubt about it. Um, and yeah, I just need to, ensure that I show up, in both of those spaces, as the best version of myself and just continue to evolve, right, to becoming a better version of myself. So, and right now, yeah, I'd say like those two projects are so big that I it's probably gonna take me into the next 5, 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'll tell you this, as far as living, listen, I want to live and die here, right here in Arlington, Virginia, Elias. Like I love living here in the DMV area. First off, I love working at GW. I love DC. I just love this area, so I'm planning to make this place my permanent home. So in the future, I don't care where you are in the world, just know I'll be here. I'll
Good
be
to
here.
know. And you don't have to tell me, I'm a DMV. I was born and raised. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, but yeah, thanks for sharing that. But I didn't have any other questions here. I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation, and you even helped me learn a bit about myself and changes I need to make in my life, specifically health wise. So appreciate that. But
Let's talk
yeah,
about it.
Yeah, it was great to have you on here. I'll be in DC visiting. Obviously, I'm from right outside of DC, so
Yeah.
make sure I shoot you a text. It'd be good to see you in person. I know it's been a little while, but thanks for coming on here. Really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you having me, Elias. Thank you for the invite.